The World of Warcraft expansion The War Within brings two returning characters to the forefront, namely Alleria Windrunner and Xal'atath. Both have made large contributions to the present state of the Warcraft story, but many of these contributions have been obscured by the major events of the main storyline. These stories will be summarized here, but they require some context. Void Lords. From the earliest time of the universe, the Void Lords have been a constant threat to its very existence. The Void Lords resided outside of the universe's reality, yet they sought to consume it all. They wished to turn it into darkness, emptiness, and void. The Void Lords were powerful, but they could not meaningfully pass into the universe's reality. They did the next best thing. They tried to turn members of the Pantheon to their side. The Pantheon consisted of the most powerful beings of the universe, the Titans, and they were sworn to protect the universe. The Void Lords sent insidious whispers into the minds of the Pantheon's members, hoping they would turn on their fellow Titans. Alas, the Titans were too strong and too willful to fall to the Void Lords. The Void Lords decided they would have to corrupt a Titan while it was still developing, sleeping in the form of a World Soul. World Souls were early-stage Titans that existed within some planets across the universe. The Titan Pantheon took it as their job to protect these young World Souls. The Void Lords sent dark, corrupting matter into the universe at random, hoping some of it would land upon World Souls and turn them into servants of the Void. The Void Lords' corrupting matter did indeed land upon some World Souls and started corrupting them. At one point, the Titan Sargeras found a World Soul that was almost fully corrupted by the Void. This was a terrifying revelation. A Void-corrupted Titan would be too strong for any of the Pantheon to face. If one ever came to be, the universe would be doomed. Sargeras decided to destroy the Void-corrupted World Soul by cutting the planet in half. Furthermore, he concluded all other World Souls would have to be destroyed as well. Any World Soul had the potential for corruption, and if one of them grew to be a Void-corrupted Titan, the universe would belong to the Void Lords. Sargeras left the Pantheon and raised an army from the Twisting Nether. This army of demons would be dubbed the Burning Legion. Their job was to obliterate World Souls across the universe in order to keep the Void Lords from corrupting them and consuming all. Azeroth, the Black Empire. A notably powerful World Soul was that of the planet Azeroth. The corrupting matter from the Void Lords had landed upon its surface and begun creating a nightmarish landscape. The corrupting matter took the form of the Old Gods, of which there are 4 known and potentially a 5th. Those known were Y'Shaarj, C'Thun, Yogg-Saron, and N'Zoth. They ruled over the surface of Azeroth in an age called the Black Empire. In time, the Pantheon found Azeroth and witnessed the horror that had grown on its surface. They needed to save the World Soul from corruption, so they created an army to crumble the Black Empire. The Titan-forged army brought order to the surface of Azeroth and imprisoned the Old Gods, ending the Black Empire. A certain dagger housed a void-based sentience called Xal'atath, the Black Blade of the Empire. It managed to escape the titanic ordering of Azeroth with its freedom. Many theories arose as to what the Black Blade of the Empire truly was. Some claimed the blade was all that remained of a once larger Old God. Others claimed it was a claw of Y'Shaarj, the Old God that was ripped from the planet by the Titan Aman'Thul. Though these theories have not been proven, nor disproven, it was clear that the power of the Old Gods ran deep within the weapon. Those who touched the blade were granted visions of Azeroth during the Black Empire. These twisted sights alone have driven many mortal minds mad. The dagger was a powerful tool for those who wanted to use shadow magic, but those who wielded it would have to exercise caution. The sentience within the blade would lie, manipulate, and confuse its wielders. With maddening whispers, it would take what it needed. Xando. Xal'atath had no intention of allowing the planet to remain ordered. The dagger found the hand of an ex-Gurubashi witch doctor who desired revenge against his former tribe, Xando. Xal'atath convinced Xando to sacrifice his followers to a black rock in the Zandalar Mountains. This black rock was really a dormant servant of the Old Gods, the Cathraxi Kithix. Kithix had once done battle with the Titan-forged Tyr, alongside another Cathraxi, Zakaj. Tyr sacrificed himself to kill Zakaj and send Kithix into a dormant state. Now, Kithix had been awakened and was armed with the Black Blade of the Empire. Unlike Xando, Kithix knew how to fully wield Xal'atath's power. It called upon an army of Old God minions, the Ykir, and brought war against the Trolls. The Trolls were victorious, and the Black Blade of the Empire was lost with the defeat of Kithix. War of the Three Hammers. Later, long after the Sundering, Modgud ruled over the Dark Iron Dwarves alongside her husband, the sorcerer Thane Thaurissan. Modgood often dispatched servants to search for magical artifacts and relics. One day, a servant returned with a blade that pulsed with dark energy. Modgood was quickly obsessed with the weapon, researching it heavily and even talking to it. She called the servant who had found it to her chambers to thank him, but no one knew who that dwarf had been. They didn't know his name or his face. It was as if he had never existed at all, or as if he had been an illusion. Concerning the war, there was a fierce battle at the Wildhammer capital Grim Batol. Dark Irons laid siege to the capital with their war golems. The Wildhammers were known for their courage, and Modgood sought to take that from them. She used Xal'atath to cut her own palm open as she cast a dark spell on the land. Shadows within Grim Batol swirled and came to life. Swords of darkness swiped at the Wildhammers from the shadows of their own city. It became a den of nightmares. The Wildhammers were forced to escape from their own capital, launching a counterattack against the Dark Iron siege. Wildhammer Thane Kandros plowed through the Dark Irons until he came face to face with Modgood. The two engaged in battle, but when Modgood reached for her dark weapon, it was gone. Perhaps it had abandoned her, leaving Modgood to die beneath the blow of Kandros' hammer. She repeated one thing as she bled out. "You promised." Natalie Seline. The First War started with the creation of the Dark Portal, and it brought the demon-empowered Orcish horde to Azeroth. They conquered Stormwind and forced the humans there to scatter through the Eastern Kingdoms. Natalie Seline was a bishop and a survivor of the First War. She resolved to find a way to defeat these demon-empowered orcs. She investigated dark magic, and her research led her to a dagger that had power over darkness itself. This concerned the bishop, and she made it her goal to find and destroy the dagger. Natalie Seline did find the blade, but once she touched it, her mind was changed. Xal'atath spoke to her. She couldn't rightfully destroy something she knew so little about. Instead, she decided to learn what she could from the Whispering Dagger. It spoke to her day and night about the void, its relation to the light, the flow between the two. There was understanding and power within the dagger, and Seline chronicled it all in a book called Secrets of the Void. The Second War started with the Orcish horde marching north through Eastern Kingdoms. By this time, Natalie Seline was well versed in wielding shadow magic through Xal'atath's instruction. Her new style of magic was unrefined and dangerous. Still, she began recruiting followers to use shadow magic against the orcs. All the while, Xal'atath's whispers continued eating away at Seline's sanity. Natalie Seline and her companions grew increasingly obsessed with Xal'atath and the Void. They began wielding shadow magic recklessly, slaughtering orcs and endangering innocents. Though Seline continued to preach caution, many lost their sanity completely, giving themselves up to the Void. The Void's desires and whispers drove these lost souls to action. They murdered Seline and stole Xal'atath. The Kirin Tor of Dalaran had watched Seline for years, skeptical of her new shadow magic. Following her death, the mages concluded it would be best to scour her teachings from history, lest others fall to the insanity of shadow magic. Though they hid her teachings away in Dalaran, they lived on through word of mouth, largely as a balance of light and dark. The Kirin Tor also searched for Xal'atath, but it was lost in the midst of the Second War. Also during the Second War, a high elven ranger came to prominence. Alleria Windrunner. Alleria Windrunner was the firstborn child of the Ranger General of Silvermoon, Larissa Windrunner, and her husband, Verath Windrunner, chief advisor to King Anasterian Sunstrider. She was the eldest of 4 siblings. Alleria had 2 younger sisters, Sylvanas and Verissa, as well as a younger brother, Lyrath. As Ranger General, her mother Larissa led the High Elven Order of Rangers called the Farstriders. As the eldest child, Alleria was raised to one day take the position of Ranger General after her mother. She was also expected to one day wield the family's bow, Thaz-Dara. The bow had been created around the time that the High Elves settled in the north of Eastern Kingdoms. The High Elves established Silvermoon City and the Kingdom of Quel'Thalas. Their Sunwell's energy spread out into the surrounding lands. An old tree in the Eversong Woods absorbed the radiating energy. The tree was named Thaz-Ala, and one of its branches was crafted into a bow, Thaz-Dara. Its first wielder of note was Talanis Windrunner, the first Ranger General of Silvermoon. He led the Rangers against the Amani trolls of the region. It passed through generations of Windrunners, only growing in strength as it continued absorbing energy from the Sunwell. The bow remained within the family and was eventually passed to Larissa Windrunner. Alleria was trained in the schools of combat, archery, scouting, and tracking. However, as Alleria grew, she began to resent the fact that she had little say in her future. She also began to disagree with the rules of High Elven society in Quel'Thalas. Specifically, she disagreed with the isolationist culture of the elves. She wanted to explore and learn about the other races of Azeroth. Larissa, her mother, would not have it. Still, Alleria was expected to one day become Ranger General. To make this official, the Farstrider Rangers tasked her with hunting a powerful lynx called Mauler. The Farstriders and Alleria's sisters witnessed the test. Alleria pursued the lynx deep into Eversong Woods, but she lost the upper hand against the beast. The potential risk to Alleria's life prompted Sylvanas to step in and kill the beast. This interference made the test invalid. Alleria remained within the Farstriders and struggled against her mother's established rules. Some rangers sided with Alleria's desire to explore the broader lands, while others agreed with Larissa's traditional isolationist stance for the High Elves. The growing tension eventually prompted Alleria to abdicate her claim to be future Ranger General. She instead nominated her sister Sylvanas due to her higher skill and merit. Sylvanas received support from other Farstriders such as Lothramar Theron and Halduran Brightwing. Due to the support Sylvanas received, Larissa had no real choice but to reluctantly accept Alleria's resignation. Alleria was released from her duties as the Ranger General in training, a role that was taken by Sylvanas. Larissa found that Sylvanas was much better suited to the role than Alleria had ever been. Alleria was given a role more in line with her desires of freedom and exploration. She was to lead a ranger company and scout far beyond the borders of Quel'Thalas for intelligence. This proved to help the eldest daughter reconcile with her mother. On the night before Alleria began her quest, Larissa gave her a necklace inlaid with an emerald, a ruby, and a sapphire. Alleria treasured the gift. The next morning, she left on a diplomatic mission to the human settlement of Eastweald. While Alleria was gone, the initial consequences of the Second War reached Elven lands. Covert members of the Horde killed Alleria's mother, Larissa, and father, Verath. With the Ranger General slain, questions arose within the Farstriders as to who the next Ranger General should truly be. Sylvanas had been training for the role and was well suited for it, but Alleria had also trained for the position and she was older. Furthermore, she remained in line to inherit Thas-Dara. Alleria heard of the tragedy and rushed back to Quel'Thalas. She reiterated that Sylvanas would be the Ranger General. Sylvanas offered Thas-Dara to her elder sister, and Alleria accepted. The Windrunner spoke to the High King of the Elves, Anasterian Sunstrider. The king didn't believe the Horde could truly threaten Quel'Thalas. For this reason, the High Elves did not fully answer Lordaeron's request for aid in the fight against the Orcs. He only sent a small force of elves to aid the Alliance out of obligation to Anduin Lothar's bloodline. Aside from this, Anasterian chose to remain isolationist instead of joining the Alliance of Lordaeron. He ordered his troops not to join the fight against the Orcs. Alleria knew Anasterian would have to change his mind eventually. For now, she disobeyed the order and led a group of rangers into battle against the Horde. The Horde had been marching north through the Eastern Kingdoms, and many had assumed they would attempt to cross over Thandal's span to enter Lordaeron lands. But they were mistaken. The Horde had built a fleet of ships and guarded it with their captured red dragons. The fleet made uncontested landfall in Hillsbrad foothills. The Alliance was caught off guard as their defenses were positioned at the span. They fell back to defend both the eastern and western routes toward the Horde's apparent target, Lordaeron's capital city. Alleria and her fellow rangers joined the fighting, thinning the Horde's ranks with bow and arrow. Even in this early skirmish, she wanted revenge against the Orcs for the deaths of her parents. During the fighting, Alleria met Lothar's lieutenant, Turalyon, and Mage of Kirin Tor, Khadgar. This battle revealed new soldiers for both sides. The Horde had placed souls of Orcish warlocks into the dead bodies of slain humans, reanimating them as undead Death Knights. The undead initially frightened the Alliance, but they were bolstered by light-infused warriors, the Paladins. Turalyon was one such Paladin. Skirmishes erupted throughout Hillsbrad, but the Alliance managed to defend the quickest routes to Lordaeron capital. The Horde was diverted into Amani Troll lands. There, the Orcish Horde joined forces with the ancient enemy of the High Elves, the Amani Trolls. While in the hinterlands, the Horde was harassed by Wildhammer Dwarven Griffin Riders. They were led by Thane Curzan Wildhammer. This forced the Orcs to make the Wildhammer home of Airy Peak a priority. They laid siege to Airy Peak, forcing the Wildhammers to hole up and defend their city. Orgrim Doomhammer decided to split the Horde into two forces. One force continued to lay siege to Airy Peak while the other marched north on Quel'Thalas. Lothar and the Alliance army arrived to defend Airy Peak and break the siege, sending half of the Horde forces back into Troll lands. This act convinced the Wildhammers to join the Alliance army. Once Lothar realized Orgrim was marching on Quel'Thalas, he dispatched Alleria and Turalyon with part of the Alliance force to stop them. Lothar himself would remain in the hinterlands to protect any routes toward Lordaeron. The Horde in the north passed through Zul'Aman to bolster their forces before assaulting Quel'Thalas. When they entered Elven lands, they found their magic was silenced. This was due to high Elven runestones that suppressed magic of the elves' enemies. The conniving Orcish warlock Gul'dan concluded the Horde would have to dismantle one of the runestones to disrupt its suppressive effects. Doomhammer didn't fully trust Gul'dan, but he allowed the warlock to destroy an Elven runestone and claim its power as his own. Without the protection of the runestones, Quel'Thalas was in danger. The Orcish Horde was now very much a threat to the High Elves. Elves were slain in numbers that hadn't been seen in millennia. This included 18 of Alleria's extended family, but also among them was her young brother, Lyrath. King Anasterion sent his forces, led by Ranger General Sylvanas, to protect their lands from the Horde. Soon after, Alleria, Turalyon, and the Alliance joined from the south. Alleria learned of the fate of her brother and kin. She was devastated, but still had work to do. She spoke with King Anasterion once again, asking that the High Elves join the Alliance army. Anasterion no longer needed convincing. This time he agreed with Alleria, and the High Elves joined the war. Unfortunately for them, the assault on Silvermoon City did not end simply because the Alliance was bolstered by the High Elves. Rather, the Horde received backup in the form of Red Dragon Riders. They bathed the Alliance army in flame, forcing them to retreat into Silvermoon City. There, Elven Magi constructed a magical barrier, powered by the immensely powerful Sunwell. The Horde could not break through the magical barrier of Silvermoon, and Orgrim grew impatient. The Elves hadn't been their main target to begin with. Orgrim left Gul'dan and his forces behind to break the barrier, while he and the rest of the Horde returned their attention onto Lordaeron's capital. During the stalemate, Alleria took some time to mourn her lost kin. Deeply struck with grief, she sought comfort from her comrade Turalyon. The two spent the night together, but Alleria was gone the next morning. Only later that day did Turalyon learn what had happened to Alleria's family. He tried to speak to Alleria about the loss, but she returned her focus onto the war and obtaining revenge against the murderers of her brother. Alleria and Turalyon suspected that the Horde would eventually return their attention to Lordaeron, but they hadn't expected King Perinold of Alterac to betray the Alliance and allow the Horde to march through his lands unimpeded. The Horde was immediately at Lordaeron's capital gates. All King Taranis Menethil could do was bravely defend his city while he waited for reinforcements. Turalyon needed to move the Alliance forces to the west quickly to attempt to save the capital. However, they were still under siege by Gul'dan and the Horde members who remained in Quel'Thalas. Strangely, Gul'dan abandoned his orders and sailed off with his soldiers. This freed the Alliance to march toward Lordaeron's capital and break the siege. As Turalyon and Alleria's army arrived in Lordaeron, Orgrim knew Gul'dan had betrayed the Horde. With that betrayal, the war had been lost. The Horde launched a full retreat, hoping to regroup back in the south. They were chased by the Alliance armies, culminating in a final battle at Blackrock Mountain. The Alliance armies had also regrouped under Anduin Lothar. In the final battle, Anduin Lothar fought against Orgrim Doomhammer, but was slain. Turalyon then took up the charge and faced Doomhammer. Turalyon was victorious, and the Alliance captured the Orcish warchief. The Horde scattered, and the Second War was over. Khadgar employed a group of mages to sever the link between Azeroth and Draenor, closing the Dark Portal. As it turned out, Alleria had become pregnant from the night she spent with Turalyon. She gave birth to a half-elven, half-human son named Arator Windrunner. As she raised her newborn son, Alleria's thoughts and feelings were consumed by the events of the war. She had been absent from Quel'Thalas twice when they needed her. First the covert attack that killed her parents, then again when she was fighting with the Alliance in the south, while half the Horde tore through the elven countryside. Alleria began to beat herself up, regretful that she had been absent for the tragedies. She hated the orcs for what they had done, and through her rage and quest for vengeance, she began ruthlessly hunting and killing many orcish survivors of the Second War. Most orc survivors had been captured and placed in internment camps. She would track and kill those who managed to escape. Her orc extermination campaign took her to the rebuilding city of Stormwind, where she would begin to raise her son. In the aftermath of the Second War, many orcs had returned through the Dark Portal to Draenor, prior to its closing. Since the planet of Azeroth proved to be difficult to conquer, the orcs made a new plan. They would open portals to other potentially weaker planets for the orcs to conquer and claim. To accomplish this, they needed to gather a number of powerful magical artifacts, which they would need to take from various locations on Azeroth and bring them to Draenor. Orcish shaman N'Zoth used the Skull of Gul'dan to reopen the Dark Portal. The Horde invaded Azeroth once again to steal the required artifacts. These thieveries were very suspicious to the Azerothians. Khadgar managed to capture a Death Knight and interrogated him to learn the Horde's new plan. The Horde intended to invade other planets by opening new portals. Though the fate of these innocent worlds were of no real concern for the Alliance, Azeroth's heroes still believed no planet should have to suffer as their sad. Khadgar informed Alleria and asked her to relay the message to Turalyon, who was now the supreme commander of the Alliance army. Alleria agreed, but reluctantly. She had been avoiding Turalyon. She still needed to inform him of their child. Turalyon was overjoyed by that news. Unfortunately, the pair would have to leave Eretor to protect Azeroth and the larger universe. Turalyon raised a small army, a strike force to follow the orcs back through the Dark Portal to Draenor and stop the Horde. This group of heroes was called the Sons of Lothar in honor of the Alliance's fallen supreme commander of the Second War. Second War veterans Khadgar, Danath Trollbane, Kurdran Wildhammer, Turalyon, and Alleria Windrunner served as the commanders for the Sons of Lothar. Prior to embarking on her expedition through the Dark Portal, Alleria melted down the necklace her mother had once given her. Of the 3 gems it contained, she gave the sapphire to Sylvanas, the ruby to Varissa, and kept the emerald for herself. The Sons of Lothar fought their way through the Dark Portal with zeal and vigor. Alleria in particular threw herself headlong into the fray to spill orc blood. Turalyon and Khadgar both noticed that she seemed to have little regard for her own safety. In time, Turalyon was able to remind her that she couldn't keep recklessly seeking vengeance. Specifically, she was reminded that she loved Turalyon, and she needed to help protect him as well as their son. This reignited their loving relationship. On Draenor, there were many concerns that the Sons of Lothar had to deal with. Their priority was stopping N'Zoth, who they assumed was in Hellfire Citadel. The Sons of Lothar established a base and laid siege to Hellfire Citadel. Its defenses fell in less than a day, but N'Zoth was not present. He had marched southwest to the Black Temple. The Sons of Lothar also learned that the Black Dragon Deathwing was on Draenor, wielding the Skull of Gul'dan. The commanders of the Sons of Lothar split up. Alleria teamed up with Khadgar and Turalyon to defend the Grond from Deathwing. They claimed the Skull of Gul'dan and forced Deathwing to flee back through the Dark Portal to Azeroth. Danath Trollbane and Kurdran Wildhammer tracked N'Zoth to the south. N'Zoth evaded the Sons of Lothar long enough to make it to the Black Temple. There he began making preparations to open new dark portals. The Sons of Lothar reunited outside the Black Temple, but they were too late. N'Zoth was too far along and too well protected for his spell to be stopped. N'Zoth harnessed the energies of the artifacts as well as the planet itself, but he wasn't skilled enough to properly wield the power. His spell began tearing the fabric of reality, generating unstable rifts and portals. The planet began breaking under the stress of the spell. N'Zoth realized doom was fast approaching. He escaped through a portal, saving himself from the coming destruction. It became clear to all that disaster was coming. Khadgar and Turalyon quickly considered their options. It was unlikely that the Sons of Lothar could evacuate back to Azeroth. Furthermore, the coming disaster could spill into the Dark Portal and impact Azeroth as well. Their only recourse was to destroy the Dark Portal and accept the coming disaster. The Sons of Lothar didn't hesitate to obliterate the Dark Portal, sealing their fates. Moments later, Oblivion hit Draenor. N'Zoth's spell had torn the planet apart, shredding reality and sending fragments of the planet spinning through the twisting nether. What remained of the planet became known as Outland. The Sons of Lothar were presumed dead from the planet's explosion. Statues of the commanders were built in Stormwind to honor their sacrifices. Ranger General Sylvanas wrote the plaque to honor her sister. Army of the Light. Naaru were beings of coalesced light, who often felt compelled to guide and protect mortals through life. Zira was one of the most powerful Naaru, the Naaru Prime, and she had taken up a cause to fight the Burning Legion. Her force was called the Army of the Light, and they were powerful enough to hold their own against the Burning Legion. Many of her survivors were Draenei, former Eredar who were forced to flee from their home of Argus. The Draenei hated the Burning Legion, since Sargeras convinced 2 of the Eredar's 3 leaders to join his Burning Legion. The Eredar who followed killed Jaden and Archimonde became demons of the Burning Legion. The 3rd leader, Prophet Velen, led his followers away to safety, escaping from their fate and adopting the name Draenei. The planet Argus became Sargeras' headquarters where the Burning Legion would operate from. The Army of the Light stood against the Legion for several millennia. Zira had visions suggesting Alleria and Turalyon would be the keys to the Legion's final defeat. 1,000 years of war. Draenor was breaking apart. Alleria and Turalyon dove into an unstable portal that led to another place, another dimension. They were separated when they landed, but they quickly found one another in the strange realm. Wherever they were, they bore witness to the breaking of Draenor. Though they were not being harmed by the breaking of the planet, they were not entirely safe in this mysterious realm. Alleria saw something standing behind Turalyon, but it fled once Alleria shot an arrow at it. Even as it passed in Turalyon's field of view, he failed to see it. Still, it left tracks behind, evidence that it had been there. The two spent a moment in an embrace, reassuring each other that they would one day return to their son. Turalyon knew that any way back to Azeroth would take a long time, an amount of time that much exceeded a human lifespan. Elves lived much longer, nearly immortal thanks to the Sunwell. The duo began searching for other survivors, but remained vigilant, wary of the creature that stalked them. They didn't find anyone else. No alliance nor horde had made it to where they were. With no real options, Turalyon called upon the light for guidance. Alleria kept an eye out for their unseen stalker. A portal of light opened in front of Turalyon, and a voice told them to enter. They did, but their stalker seemed to follow. On the other side was Draenor's surface, half dead and shattered. They were no longer in the twisting nether. The voice that spoke to them was a warrior of the light, Lothraxion. He was a Nathrezim, but he was deeply imbued with light magic rather than fel. He had been sent by Zira to specifically rescue Alleria and Turalyon. Lothraxion, Turalyon, and Alleria spoke for 3 days. He told them the realm they had entered was the Twisting Nether. Lothraxion also revealed he had fought against the Burning Legion for thousands of years, and before that, he had served the Legion for thousands more. Still, even with his millennia of combat experience, he was unsettled by their unseen stalker. Lothraxion concluded it was an agent of the Burning Legion. Over the course of the 3-day conversation, Lothraxion explained that the Horde were really extensions of the demonic Burning Legion. His army, the Army of the Light, was fighting the Burning Legion, and they wanted Alleria and Turalyon's help. However, that would need to wait until the creature hunting them had been dealt with. Lothraxion offered his help in defeating the creature, and Turalyon accepted. Alleria did not. There was no reason why an agent of the Burning Legion would target Turalyon and Alleria over a commander in the Army of the Light. She suggested they part ways, and when it followed Lothraxion, they could trap it and kill it. Lothraxion reluctantly agreed to the plan, but gave Turalyon some instruction on how to better wield light magic for their protection. Then Lothraxion departed, and the pair discussed his request. They decided they would speak to the Mother of the Light and request to be brought to Azeroth. In exchange, they could raise an entire army for her, rather than simply the two of them. They set up a camp, and Turalyon left to find water. He returned empty-handed. Turalyon claimed they needed to discuss their son. Alleria claimed they could talk about Methane later. Turalyon continued, saying someone needed to stay behind to raise him. Alleria stabbed Turalyon in the neck. Their son's name was Eretor, not Methane. This Turalyon was an imposter. The disguised demon roared and lunged at Alleria with a dagger. Alleria dodged, pivoting and deftly disarming its weapon. Alleria grabbed her bow and quiver and pointed it at the dying demon, whose name would eventually be revealed as Eradication. The real Turalyon rushed back to Alleria's side. They discussed the implications of what had occurred. Apparently, they had been the demon's actual target. This implied they were more valuable than the commander of the Army of the Light, Lothraxion. Alleria questioned the demon as to why. The demon's disguise faded. It was an Eridar, and it simply claimed it was one of many. Alleria shot the demon non-lethally and drew another arrow. The demon spoke again, preaching the greatness of the Legion. Alleria shot it again. She drew another arrow and asked why it had been hunting them. The demon was half insane, claiming that fate spun around Turalyon and Alleria. It went on to threaten them, as well as Eretor. Alleria shot her arrow through the demon's skull. Its body faded into dust. An hour later, a beam of light poured over Turalyon and Alleria. A powerful, calm voice spoke to them. It was Zira. She claimed the two represented hope for both Azeroth and the larger universe. Alleria suggested they all return to Azeroth, raise an army, and fight the Burning Legion. Zira explained that would not work. Time flowed differently in the turbulent parts of the universe, where the Legion mainly resided. On Azeroth, time was calm, passing comparatively slow. For each year they spent preparing on Azeroth, the Legion would have a decade. The preparation and fighting would have to occur wherever the Legion was. Zira told them that Azeroth was home to many future heroes, but the planet was not ready for all-out war with the Legion. Turalyon asked why the Legion cared about the two of them specifically. Zira wasn't certain, but she explained a vision she had after the two crossed the Dark Portal. She saw something the Legion had been hiding, an Emerald Star. Zira hoped once Turalyon and Alleria reached the Emerald Star, a way to defeat the Burning Legion would be revealed. But the demons were well aware of this, so they decided to send an assassin to kill them. Zira explained that the demonic assassin was not dead. Demons used vessels outside of the Twisting Nether. Once their vessel was killed, their souls simply returned to the Twisting Nether to gain a new one. The demon would return, and it knew of Eretor. Alleria passionately claimed she would do anything to keep Eretor, her people, and her world safe. Turalyon agreed. A portal of light was generated in front of them once again, and they walked through, promising they would one day return to their son. Zira and Lothraxion were on the other side of the portal, along with many others to welcome them into the Army of the Light. They were on the Zenadar, the Army of the Light's space and realm traversing vessel. Alleria and Turalyon worked in the Army of the Light for the next 40 years. Time passed quickly compared to where they came from, but it was also erratic and inconsistent. They fought alongside the army and became comrades in arms with the army's soldiers. They raided Legion strongholds and mourned the deaths of their allies. Turalyon worked with the army's exarchs as a military strategist. Then he worked as a smith and forged a holy sword. Then he worked as a swordsman to master his new weapon. Alleria also studied holy warfare. She learned to shoot arrows of light from a bow of light, such that she no longer needed to carry a physical bow and quiver any longer. Still, she enjoyed carrying her family's bow, Thas-Dora, into battle. Turalyon was prepared for an ascension ritual. He would be questioned and judged. He gave his story. He was a youth in Lordaeron, then a priest, then a paladin in defense of his world. Zira poured light into him as he held Alleria's hands tightly. He was being reforged in light, reborn. Meanwhile, Alleria received a vision of Stormwind during its reconstruction. Statues were being erected for the commanders and the Sons of Lothar. Sylvanas was there, as was her son Eretor, being held on the shoulders of a paladin. Though 40 years had passed for Turalyon and Alleria, only 2 had passed on Azeroth. Through the light, Alleria shared her love for the child. She saw the boy smile, look at the statue of his mother, and reach out. Turalyon's reforging was complete. The light found him worthy, and he transcended mortality. He was now light-forged, one with the light, and an eternal protector of creation. In the process, he too had seen Eretor, grown as a paladin of the Silver Hand. He embraced Alleria with tears in his eyes. Alleria had been right. It would be their destiny to see their son again. Turalyon also had a vision of the Emerald Star. Fellow members of the Army of the Light congratulated Turalyon. Lothraxion shook his hand, as was customary for humans. Alleria taught him how to shake hands the day prior. Lothraxion told Alleria she would one day ascend as well, but she wasn't too concerned about that. Lothraxion and Alleria had developed a close friendship. As a former demon of the Burning Legion, he knew how demons thought. He told her the Legion did not fear the light. Rather, what Sargeras and his Legion truly wanted to do was destroy the Shadow, the Void. The creatures from the Void were very dangerous and frightfully powerful. Within the next decade, Alleria saw this firsthand. The Army of the Light launched an attack on a Legion prison world in the Twisting Nether. However, when they arrived, all the demons of the Legion had been killed, permanently. Demons that died while in the Twisting Nether did not return. These demons had been butchered, as had the prisoners on the planet. It was clear that this was done by creatures of the Void. While Alleria searched for survivors, a shadow attacked her. It wrapped around her throat and assaulted her mind with dark magic. Her mind was transported elsewhere. She was on a demonic planet, Argus. Then she was in front of the Emerald Star. It was calling, begging for help. Then Alleria saw herself happily walking off a cliff and falling into infinite darkness. The instant had passed, and Alleria's light spell destroyed her attacker. She collapsed to the ground, processing the mental trespass. Turalyon was quickly at her side, healing her. She shook the attack off. She had been warned to be cautious of the Void creatures, and she would not forget that anytime soon. She kept what she had experienced in her mind to herself. The shadow and light had collided within her, and they revealed truth, visions of her future. Alleria asked Lothraxion questions to learn more about the Void. He claimed the Legion was a mercy when compared to the victims of the Shadows. After allowing Void to taint their minds and Shadow into their hearts, these victims had no future outside of madness. Alleria pondered. If someone were able to wield the void while keeping their sanity, they could be a powerful weapon against the Burning Legion. Lothraxion suggested that she not talk about this prospect. Zero would not be pleased to hear about it. Still, Lothraxion continued to speak to Alleria. Not many had been able to withstand the void's power. Those who used dark magic consistently grew hungrier for more. It was addictive and almost certainly destructive. Though there had been one who mastered the void. Lothraxion told Alleria about the Locust Walker. Back when he served the Legion, Lothraxion had been tasked with capturing the Locust Walker. The Locust Walker had used the void to kill countless demons, yet maintained control over his own will. The Locust Walker had even killed Lothraxion himself once, but the Locust Walker intentionally did so outside of the Twisting Nether. He claimed to have seen a unique destiny awaiting Lothraxion. Alleria took her newfound information to Zira. She asked for permission to search for the Locust Walker. Zira responded with disgust. The light did not associate with the void. She claimed if Alleria pursued contact with the void, she would lose everything. Turalyon, Eretor, Silvermoon, Azeroth, everything. Alleria claimed she understood and dropped the prospect. Still, over the next centuries, Alleria considered the visions she had seen. She would walk on Argus, she would see the Emerald Star, and she would fall into darkness. It had been 500 years since the Second War, yet only 20 had passed on Azeroth. Heroes of Azeroth were marching through the Dark Portal into Outland. The Burning Legion was mobilizing their armies in an attempt to stop them. This gave the Army of the Light an opening. The Legion had mobilized troops away from Argus. Alleria spoke with Zira and Turalyon, suggesting she infiltrate Argus and find the Emerald Star. Zira suggested the two of them go together, but Alleria said she should go on her own. Zira held fast, and sent the pair to Argus together. They took a pod to Argus, but it would take a long time. Alleria explained her visions to Turalyon. Her visions had not come from the light, at least not solely. Turalyon understood, and he was not put off by them. Unlike Zira, he would accept aid from outside forces in the universe that wished to destroy the Legion. Turalyon trusted Alleria and her instincts. The pair landed on Argus. It was a dead planet, no life, only sulfur and charcoal. They moved stealthily through the planet's cliffs and caverns. Alleria's trained eyes fell upon a suspicious rock. She turned it, and the cliff face slid open, revealing a hidden passageway. The two entered cautiously. They spent hours navigating the dark passageway within the planet. There were forks and turns, but they maintained their orientation. The pair made their way to an opening. Through a slit in the wall, they could see a fell war factory. It had forges, barracks, stockpiles, and countless war machines. Someone had been using these caverns to spy on the Burning Legion. Further ahead were ruins. The architecture was unlike that of the Legion. Rather, it was closer to architecture Alleria remembered from Azeroth, from the Titans. As she pondered the implications, something entered her mind. It was an emerald glow. It was an emerald prison. It was panicked and fearful. Alleria cast it out of her head and she collapsed. Turalyon caught her before the Emerald Star entered his mind as well. The Emerald Star was alive, and it needed help. The being within the Emerald Star tried to communicate. It sent Alleria messages, visions, much more powerful and more ancient than any visions prior. She saw energy and matter spinning through the cosmos, then a planet orbiting a sun, then generations of life, then betrayal, imprisonment, and pain, then the enslavement and burning of other worlds, then screaming for help, then two bright lights from Azeroth. Alleria returned to her own consciousness. She was lying on her side when Turalyon shook her back to her senses. She had just learned that the planet Argus had a soul, as did Azeroth. Alleria and Turalyon swore they would free Argus, but for now, they moved back through the tunnels. Hours later, they emerged from where they had entered. They sprinted back toward their transport. Unfortunately, demons had found the transport and surrounded it with overwhelming numbers. They had no choice but to fight. Alleria and Turalyon charged at the demons. They slayed dozens of demons at a time, but there was always more to take their place. The Endless Legion moved to capture the pair as they struggled against their numbers. When all hope seemed lost, Alleria heard a whisper in her mind. The light could not save them, but she would see her son again. Alleria reached out to the dark whisper in her mind. Shadow flowed into her, voices flooded her thoughts. She didn't know how to wield the darkness, but the darkness knew what it needed to do. A dark rift opened beside them. Turalyon saw what Alleria was doing, and it pained him deeply. He was one with the light. She had just given in to the void. Alleria dragged Turalyon into the dark rift, which pained him again, this time more physically. The light and shadow could not coexist. Still, Turalyon survived. They arrived far from Argus in the twisting nether. Turalyon questioned her. He would have rather died than watch his beloved fall to darkness. She did what she had to do. They weren't destined to die there. Turalyon reached out to hold her hand, but as they touched, they both experienced a spark of pain. The light and shadow could not coexist. Alleria turned away. She told Turalyon to return to the Zenadar. The army of the light still needed him. She told them they were not enemies, nor would they ever be. She gave him her love, opened another dark rift, and left. Turalyon watched through tears. If everything Alleria had heard about the Void was true, she needed to learn how to manage its power. Otherwise, she would lose herself to madness. She needed to find the Locust Walker, quickly. 500 years passed. Alleria had not been able to find the Locust Walker. That was, until she was intentionally captured by the Burning Legion. She hoped she would be brought to a prison world, and hoped further still other prisoners would have information she could use. Alleria was brought to Niskara, a prison planet. They took her bow, Thas'dara, and placed her in a cell for the time being. There, Alleria found what she had been searching for. The Locust Walker occupied a cage hanging above her. She made a deal with her fellow prisoner. He agreed to instruct her on how to master the Void as he had, if she successfully broke them out of their imprisonment. Her first lesson occurred from the confines of the cell. Alleria was eventually brought before the Legion's malicious Inquisitors. Their High Inquisitor was skillful in the ways of torture. The Apprentice Inquisitor, however, was less skilled. He stung Alleria's mind with magical burning fell needles and demanded to know how they could find the Zenadar. To Alleria, this was painful but dull, a pitiful attempt to get her to speak. The Inquisitor then threatened to put her soul in a soulstone and subsequently gift it to the demon Eradication, the demon that knew about Eretor. Alleria did not respond. The Apprentice Inquisitor decided she needed more convincing and removed her bonds to torture her more thoroughly. Alleria took the opportunity to apply her latest lesson in the Void. Excited whispers flowed through her mind as she tapped into the shadow magic. The last thing the Legion Inquisitor had expected was for a warrior they thought was in the Army of the Light to attack them with void magic. The dark magic surged in Alleria's body. She simultaneously obliterated the Inquisitor as well as the Locust Walker's cage, freeing him. There had been no witnesses. Alleria laid eyes on the Locust Walker for the first time. He was an ethereal, energy-infused souls whose corporeal forms had once been blown away by Dementius the All-Devouring. Ethereals generally wore enchanted cloth wrappings to support their forms, but the Locust Walker presently had none. The Locust Walker teleported them both to an empty void. It was dark and silent. There was no ground to stand on, no sky above, nothing. Before she could do anything else, she would have to grow comfortable. Alleria would have to learn how to maintain her sanity. The Locust Walker freely perused Alleria's mind and memories while they trained. He explained to master the Void, she would have to do more than touch it. She would have to become one with it. Therein lied the danger. The Void, by nature, was hostile to life and sanity. Darkness shifted and swirled around Alleria. A storm of voices spoke to her, so many that picking out the Locust Walker's words was nearly impossible. Still, the Locust Walker guided her. There were truths to be learned in the shadow. The light was blinding, obscuring possibilities, but the shadow was just as blind. Some fragments of destiny could only be seen in the light, others only in the dark. Then she saw horrifying visions. Alleria saw light passing through the cosmos, binding anything it touched to its will. It touched the planet of Azeroth, demanding absolute obedience. Other planets had been burned in holy fire. Servants of the light were unkillable monsters who wouldn't stop fighting until the light consumed all. The Locust Walker explained, just as the light viewed the shadow as a dangerous, all-consuming threat, the Void viewed the light in the same way. Neither viewpoint was accurate, but neither was entirely wrong either. The light sought one path and turned its back on all others. The Void saw all paths as true. Alleria saw herself slain by Turalyon's light-infused sword. She then saw herself shooting down Eretor with her bow. She saw herself pledging loyalty to an Azerothian old god. She saw herself slaying it and then becoming an old god herself. In the Void, every vision was true, but she recalled the shadow was also blind. These visions weren't the whole truth. They weren't destiny. It was simply impossible for her to harm her own son. That thought kept her sane in the sea of visions. The Locust Walker determined she was ready. She could allow the shadow into her, and she would retain her sanity. Yet Alleria decided she was not yet willing. When she took the plunge, she would have no other choice. Suddenly, the light shot her a vision. Turalyon was in danger. Turalyon had risen to the rank of High Exarch in the Army of the Light. They had spent the past 500 years assaulting Argus with the hope of freeing its world soul. Xera had shifted her focus to helping those on Azeroth from a distance. She had prophesied Azeroth was still crucial to defeating the Burning Legion. Turalyon and his efforts no longer mattered to Xera. At some point, Lothraxion had recovered a body. It belonged to Alleria. Turalyon was brought to the corpse's location. The body wasn't Alleria's, it was Lothraxion's, gravely wounded. Turalyon spun to see Lothraxion's imposter. The Eridar assassin, Eradication, had returned and stabbed a fell blade into his chest. The blade was covered in a paralytic poison. Turalyon collapsed. The assassin intended to place both Lothraxion and Turalyon into soul stones and deliver them to Kil'jaeden. Alleria witnessed this from her place in the void. She cast away the shadows and tried to move toward Turalyon. The Locust Walker was angered, but then grew curious. Alleria showed him a soulstone from Niskara. When he studied it, he could feel the love between Alleria and Turalyon, and he chuckled. He claimed that she had a unique destiny indeed, and she should go to Turalyon. The Locust Walker showed her that those two soulstones were linked, and she could pass through them to the Xanadar. He claimed they would meet again. Alleria arrived on the Xanadar before Turalyon's soul was drained from his body. She was wrapped in dark power. The demon lunged at her. She didn't need to move. The shadowy magic took care of the attacker for her. The darkness coalesced into a curved spike, and it stabbed through the demon's chest. The demon fell to its knees and quickly realized it had to flee. It vanished in panic, shifting into another realm. Alleria pulled the paralyzing poison from Lothraxion's body and told him to save Turalyon. The ranger then gave chase to the fleeing demon. She called upon her void powers to track the Eridar, shifting between realms. Alleria had slain it once on Draenor, but it came back, grew stronger over the centuries. And right when it had almost claimed one of its marks, Alleria returned, as if she were the demon's worst nightmare. Alleria's dark magic gripped the Eridar and dragged it back to the Xanadar. They were in the twisting nether. The demon attacked in terror and desperation. It was useless. Alleria approached it slowly. The Eridar had threatened her son, so she slayed it without remorse. Turalyon recovered, but he was still in pain. Physically from the effects of the poison, but also emotionally from witnessing what Alleria had become. He would always love her, but for the moment he could not yet find those words. Alleria explained that her destiny laid with the darkness. It was the only way for her to protect those she loved. Lothraxion briefly tried to convince her otherwise, that she had not yet crossed the threshold. She said she would one day. Turalyon asked her to leave him for the time being. Xera would not tolerate her presence. Alleria knew this much and welcomed her anger. Xera did indeed join Turalyon, Alleria, and Lothraxion in the chamber. She had warned Alleria not to associate with the Shadow, but it was too late now. The Naru Prime gathered her power, but hesitated. She asked Alleria if she would renounce the Void and return to light. Alleria avoided the question, claiming she would defeat the Burning Legion. Xera decided to imprison Alleria, until the time came when she renounced the Void and rejoined the Light's purpose. Alleria would remain imprisoned on the Xanadar until the Burning Legion's third invasion of Azeroth. As the Burning Legion launched their third invasion of Azeroth, the planet's defenders needed to equip themselves with powerful weapons to fight back. Thas'dara. Alleria's youngest sister Varisa had spent many years searching for her. Interestingly, the Far Striders had come across information about her potential location. A demon had told them Alleria was once held captive by the Legion on the world Niskara. Varisa and the Far Striders went to Niskara, but only managed to recover the bow Thas'dara. It was clear Alleria had escaped. For the time being, the bow would be used in the fight against the Burning Legion. Xal'atath. In order to stand against the Legion, Alonzus Fowl decided the various sects of the Light's worship should join together, regardless of faction. To accomplish this, he chose the well-loved adventurer and high priest to champion the cause. To prove their worth, the champion underwent a quest to reclaim a lost artifact attuned to the priesthood. This artifact was Xal'atath, Blade of the Black Empire. The artifact was in possession of the Twilight's Hammer cult, and they intended to use it to conduct a dark ritual and empower their newest rising leader, the Shadow Deacon. This leader was responsible for bringing the Twilight's Hammer back into hiding following the fall of Deathwing. He was cautious and calculating, operating in secrecy, but that changed once he laid his hands on Xal'atath. He became arrogant and hungry for power. The Blade suggested that he build a camp in Tristfall Glades. This was the site where Tyr killed the Cathraxi Zakaj and wounded Kithix. Tyr and Zakaj had been buried in the same tomb. The Shadow Deacon had found this tomb and planned to resurrect the Cathraxi who died alongside Tyr. Xal'atath helped him open the tomb's locks. Mora Tharsan had a double agent working in the Twilight's Hammer, Shadow Lord Slaghammer. Together, Slaghammer and the High Priest Champion interrupted the Shadow Deacon Farthing's ritual. They claimed Xal'atath to be used against the Legion invasion. The Black Blade immediately began whispering to its new holder. Xal'atath suggested that the wielder drain Zakaj's corpse of its dark essence, to ensure that it could no longer be a threat in the future. The champion agreed and drained Zakaj's essence into the Black Blade. With this success, Alonza's Fowl introduced the High Priest to Prophet Velen, who led them to the Netherlight Temple. Imprisoned here was a void god. Naaru were beings of light, but sometimes those beings were damaged and the light within leaked out. When this light was drained, void energies took their place, and the Naaru became a dark Naaru, spreading darkness instead of light. Darkened Naaru could recover naturally and return to their light form, but it took thousands of years. Furthermore, Naaru whose light was forcibly drained were transformed into another being, a void god. Void gods were more powerful and darker than even the darkened Naaru. The former Naaru, Sa'ara, had been drained of its light and was now the void god Soraka. The priesthood of the Netherlight Temple intended to bring the Naaru that had fallen to darkness back to the light. The High Priest used Xal'atath to drain the dark essence into the Black Blade. In doing so, Soraka was returned to the light form, Sa'ara. Argus. The mortal races of Azeroth decided to take the fight to the Legion's homeworld. They boarded a ship called the Vindikar and planned to meet with the Army of Light above Argus. When they arrived, the Zenidar was shot down. Turalyon and Alleria survived the crash. The army of Azeroth caught up with Turalyon and Alleria for the first time since they had crossed the Outland portal. They returned to the Vindikar so the duo could meet their son. Alleria swore she would not let her family be separated ever again. Alleria's sister Varisa informed her what had become of Sylvanas, the new war chief of the Horde. Alleria couldn't believe it. She remembered the Horde from the Second War and all the atrocities they had committed against her people. Varisa didn't include that Sylvanas was now undead on top of that. Alleria decided to allow the Hunters of Azeroth to continue using her family's bow, Thas'dara, though she may one day ask for it back. For the time being, the Zenidar was surrounded by the Legion and Xerar was trapped. The heroes cleared the crash site and freed Xera, teleporting her to the Vindikar. As Xera was repaired on the Vindikar, she attempted to reforge Illidan in the light as she prophesied he would defeat the Legion. Illidan resisted. He did not wish to be light forged and live as her servant. Xera did not care for his wishes and began transforming him by force. Illidan fought back, destroying Xera with an eye beam. Turalyon was outraged, but he could not kill Illidan. They were the only ones who could carry out her mission and defeat the Legion. Alleria continued to act as a scout for the army. She found a darkened Naaru, Lura, in the seat of the Triumvirate. A long time ago, Lura had stayed behind on Argus to cover for the fleeing Draenor. She was damaged and became a darkened Naaru. Lura's void energies had become a rallying point for members of the Shadow Guard. The Shadow Guard were void-wielding ethereals like the Locust Walker. However, unlike the Locust Walker, they had largely gone mad due to their use of void magic. Their goal was to corrupt Argus's world soul, as was the original goal of the Void Lords. The Locust Walker himself investigated the Shadow Guard of Argus, and he reunited with Alleria. This gave Alleria another chance to follow her destiny and take the plunge into darkness, embracing the void fully. They hunted a void revenant, Xal'atath. They killed it, and she consumed its heart. As long as she maintained control of her mind, the void was her power to wield. Alleria and the Locust Walker led adventurers to find Lura, the darkened Naaru. They fought through the nearby Shadow Guard and defeated the Naaru. Alleria channeled a spell at the Locust Walker's suggestion. Surprisingly, the void energies within Lura coalesced and entered Alleria's body. She was now one with the void, possessing a new void form. She and the Locust Walker departed to test the limits of her newfound power. Alleria learned to control her new void form, and she could turn it off and on at will. The heroes of Azeroth eventually defeated the Legion and imprisoned their leader, Sargeras. Heroic hunters used Thas'dara, and heroic priests used Xal'atath in their fight against Sargeras. Over the course of the many battles throughout the Legion's third invasion of Azeroth, Xal'atath whispered in its wielder's mind, revealing the blade's hidden knowledge about a vast amount of enemies. Xal'atath expended a large portion of its power to fight the Legion. The consciousness within the blade fell into a dormant state. Xal'atath went missing after the Legion invasion. It was either lost or abandoned. It would soon be found by the Naga. With the fighting complete, Alleria and Turalyon could finally return to their homeworld. Alleria was happy to return, but she feared what had become of Sylvanas. 3 sisters. Alleria had returned to Azeroth, but she had been avoiding returning to her homeland of Quel'Thalas. Much had changed since she left following the Second War. Somehow, her beloved sister Sylvanas was war chief of the Horde. Farisa had gone on her own adventures and started a family in Dalaran. Alleria needed to see where she stood with her sisters now that so much time had passed. She discussed her plan with Turalyon, all the while resisting the insidious whispers from the Void. The 3 sisters would meet in the Ghostlands and clear the undead from the home they had all grown up in, Windrunner Spire. Alleria and Farisa were the first to arrive. Farisa spoke of how Sylvanas had comforted her after her husband Ronan died in Garrosh's attack on Theramore. The two had bonded over their hatred for the warmongering orc. They even conspired to poison his food, but Farisa backed out on that plan. Sylvanas eventually arrived, and Alleria's mind was flooded with whispers of the Void. She ignored the whispers. The Windrunner sisters were together again, and they had much to speak about. Sylvanas showed Alleria the dead scar and the mindless undead that roamed it. The 3 sisters started their quest to clear away the undead. They all used their bows to shoot down their enemies. As the fighting continued, Sylvanas transformed into her Banshee state, and Alleria revealed her Void form. Of course, the 2 sisters hated seeing what had become of the other. They shouted at one another, but Farisa was able to calm the situation. The sisters worked together and successfully cleared the undead from Windrunner Spire. Alleria and Farisa departed, yet Sylvanas remained behind. She had her Dark Rangers in position to ambush and kill her sisters, but she never gave the signal to attack. Farisa returned to Dalaran to raise her twin sons. Alleria returned to Turalyon and their son Eretor. Sylvanas didn't mind letting them continue living for the time being. She believed all would serve death in time. Void Elves. A new war between the Horde and the Alliance was brewing. The Alliance had a need for allies. Alleria took it upon herself to bring the Blood Elves back to the Alliance, as they once had been during the Second War. She held an audience with their leader and her former comrade in the Farstriders, Lorthamar Thuron. He was annoyed that she had come simply to ask the Blood Elves to support the Boy King Anduin and the Alliance. Lorthamar refused the request to join, but he granted Alleria a chance to see the Sunwell. When Alleria approached the Sunwell, it spawned various Void beings due to her link with the Void. Alleria and the Blood Elves destroyed the Void creatures, yet Lorthamar proclaimed she was banished from seeing the Sunwell again due to the danger she represented. Interestingly, this hadn't been the first time this had happened. Apparently there were other Blood Elves with ties to the Void. Alleria resolved to seek them out. She arrived in the Ghostlands and followed notes left by Magister Umbric, a scholar of the Void. He turned out to be the leader of the Void-touched exiles. He had been studying a Void world, and with the help of his notes, Alleria opened a portal to the world, the Telogros Rift. She entered and was greeted by Umbric and the other exiles. She immediately felt a kinship with them. Telogros Rift was all that remained of a Void-infested planet. An immensely powerful being, likely Sargeras, destroyed the planet long ago by killing the Great Ones who ruled it, likely old gods. While in Telogros Rift, the Blood Elves were attacked by a Void-corrupted ethereal, Durzan. Durzan was attempting to corrupt the Blood Elves to serve the Void, and had been behind the Void spawns at the Sunwell. He launched Void assaults on the Blood Elves' minds, and began a ritual to further their corruption. Alleria encouraged them to fight the Whispers while she did battle with Durzan. She was able to defeat Durzan, but part of the ritual had already been completed. The Blood Elf exiles had been transformed physically, though not mentally. They were now Void Elves. Alleria took it upon herself to lead them and teach them how to manage the power of the Void as she had. In return, the Void Elves fought for the Alliance. Even Alleria's teacher, the Locust Walker, made his way to Telogros Rift to observe and assist the new Void wielders. Battle for Azeroth. Alleria was an Alliance leader during the Fourth War. During the war, she became aware of how cruel and evil her sister Sylvanas had become. The Horde war chief had been responsible for many atrocities over the course of the war. The war between the Horde and Alliance escalated, eventually culminating in an assault on Sylvanas' loyalists in Durotar. Alleria was ready to do battle, but Varrock Saurfang challenged Sylvanas to a mock Garah to spare the world any further bloodshed. Sylvanas killed him, but in the process admitted she did not care for the Horde. This undermined any authority she once had, and she fled the scene. A mysterious whispering dagger. The Tortolan collector Koju found an ominous whispering blade at an altar in Atal Graal. Naga had left it there, and in time it became clear that the Naga wanted the dagger back. Furthermore, the Naga began invading the shores of Zuldazar to claim other artifacts. The Tortolan employed adventurers to investigate why the Naga were interested in these artifacts. Adventurers took up the Black Blade and began to hear faint whispers. Xal'atath weakly requested for the adventurers to help recover its strength through claiming souls. The nearby Naga forces served this purpose. With Xal'atath's strength recovered, the blade explained what the Naga were up to. They had been preparing for the old god N'Zoth's return to prominence. They were preparing a ritual that would wipe the surface of all those who did not serve N'Zoth. This spell needed 3 artifacts, one of Void, one of Storm, and one of Sea. Xal'atath and its new wielder moved to claim the artifacts before the Naga could. The Void artifact was in Kul Tiras, Drustvar region. A spell led by an elf, the Chronicler of Whisperers Inanis, was being performed, seemingly to destroy the artifact. Nonetheless, the adventurers slayed the ritualists, claimed the Void Stone, and allowed Xal'atath to absorb the artifact's power. Now the Black Blade had gained enough power to transcend its form as a weapon. Xal'atath's consciousness possessed the body of the slain elf Inanis and used the new form to continue her plans. However, she was still forced to remain close to the dagger that once housed her consciousness. The duo proceeded to recover the second artifact. The Artifact of Sea was presently in the possession of a pirate. Interestingly, this artifact was a trident pilfered from the Naga. The pirate's den was in Tiragard Sound. Elsbeth Wavecutter would not hand her loot over easily, but the adventurer prevailed and claimed the treasure. The Trident of the Deep Ocean was brought to Xal'atath's new form. She used it to go stronger, and then locate the last artifact, a crown named Tempest Caller. The Artifact of Storm was in possession of Toatana, a greedy Makrura living on the shore of Vol'dun. Toatana was slain, the Tempest Crown was collected, and was presented to Xal'atath. To further ensure that Naga failed in their efforts, Xal'atath suggested they destroy the location where they would need to conjure their spell, the Precipice of Oblivion in Stormsong Valley. Xal'atath and the adventurer entered the Precipice of Oblivion. Here, Xal'atath's true intention was revealed. The adventurer was suspended in the air by shadow magic, as N'Zoth and Xal'atath made a deal. Xal'atath presented the 3 artifacts, along with the dagger that once housed her consciousness, and gave them to the old god N'Zoth. In return, Xal'atath's consciousness was fully separated from the dagger, allowing her to move freely with her new body. She took her leave, but suggested she would be seen again. The adventurer had fallen for Xal'atath's ruse, and inadvertently delivered a group of powerful relics to N'Zoth. A group of raiders were forced to enter the Precipice of Oblivion to rectify the previous mistake. The Black Blade itself was no longer tied to Xal'atath, but it continued to change hands. N'Zoth gave it to Uunat, who upon its death dropped it to Horde adventurers who gave it to their faction leader, War Chief Sylvanas. Then the Black Blade was given to Nathanos, who later snuck away from the rest of the Horde to give it to the Naga Queen Ashara. Ashara sought to eventually free herself and the Naga from the old god's service, but she was captured by minions of N'Zoth. She would be freed by adventurers and the Black Dragon Prince Wrathion, and she gave him the Black Blade in return. During an attack on N'Zoth, Wrathion stabbed the Black Blade into the old god, defeating it in an eruption of dark energy. The blade was not found. It had potentially been destroyed for good. Alleria's connection to the Void allowed for her to hear N'Zoth's whispers, for better or worse. However, new voices seemed to replace N'Zoth's after its defeat. The new voices swore they would punish Sylvanas for her many crimes during the Fourth War. One such crime was the burning of the World Tree Teldrassil, killing countless Night Elven innocents in the process. The Alliance responded by invading and capturing Sylvanas' seat of power, the Undercity, a battle which Alleria took part in. Alleria and Turalyon were placed in charge of tracking Sylvanas down. Alleria regretted not killing Sylvanas when they had met at Windrunner Spire. The Void gave her visions of 1,000 potential futures about her sister. Sylvanas was a monster in all of them. The pair made little progress in finding her. In time, The whispers of the void provoked Alleria into reluctantly interrogating civilians about the whereabouts of Sylvanas and her loyalists. Alleria eventually learned to check Faldir's Cove. Alleria and Turalyon went to Faldir's Cove and interrogated another suspicious individual, invading their mind with void magic. It was revealed that the Dark Ranger was headed to Zandalar. Jaina Proudmoore witnessed the torturous interrogation methods and reported back to Stormwind. King Anduin claimed these methods were justified in light of Sylvanas' atrocities during the war. Not too long ago, Jaina was also willing to cross moral boundaries for the Horde's attack on Theramore. Sylvanas planned to destroy the Loa of Death Bonsamdi and escape to the Shadowlands. She broke the veil between life and the afterlife and connected Azeroth to the Shadowlands. In the realm of the afterlife, Sylvanas joined forces with the Jailer. There, the Jailer abducted King Anduin, leaving Stormwind without a ruler. Turalyon was appointed the Regent Lord, and Alleria assisted him in maintaining the alliance. Eventually, Sylvanas was defeated, captured, and put on trial. Alleria was present for Sylvanas' trial and sentencing. She spoke with Varisa of how they hoped Sylvanas could one day fully pay for her crimes and reunite with them. The Dark Heart. A primal incarnate, Iridikron, escaped his confines on the Dragon Isles. He wished to reclaim Azeroth from what the Titans had turned it into during the Ordering and after. He uncovered an ancient artifact. It was similar to the Dragon Soul created by Deathwing. Iridikron took the artifact and brought it back in time with the help of the infinite Dragonflight. There, Iridikron empowered the artifact with the giant, immensely powerful proto-drake, Galakrond's essence. The artifact was thereby dubbed the Dark Heart. Iridikron delivered the Dark Heart to someone known as the Harbinger. The Harbinger. The Harbinger was now equipped with the Dark Heart. She used the relic to generate an army of Void Spawn. She further bolstered her forces by allying with the Nerubians of Ashkahet. It was still unknown what the Harbinger was after. Void Spawn were spotted off the southern coast of Kalimdor and in the north of Eastern Kingdoms. This increase in Void activity was apparent to those who shared a connection to the Void, particularly the Void Elves. Azeroth itself sent ominous visions to heroes across the planet in what was called the Radiant Song. The Radiant Song was seemingly connected to the Harbinger's actions. Alleria in particular was affected. She was tasked with finding out what the Harbinger was trying to do and where the Dark Heart was. Meanwhile, Jaina Proudmoore consulted Magni Bronzebeard, Azeroth's speaker. Magni had grown resentful of the planet, but that didn't matter much as he was quickly incapacitated. Alleria traveled to Telegra's Rift to confer with Magister Umbric and the Void Elves. A Void Elf investigator, sent to Northrend to check on Void activity around Galakron's bones, never returned. Alleria decided to check the area herself. She tracked the activity from Galakron's bones to Ulduar. Outside Ulduar, she discovered the Void Elf investigator had fallen to the Void and allied with the Harbinger. Alleria pursued the Harbinger through a Void Rift to Argus. She was brought to the place where she had absorbed the Dark Naru, Lura. She was granted visions of her memories, Erator as a boy, the Demon Eradication, the Second War, refusing the role of Ranger General. It seemed as if the Harbinger had a personal interest in Alleria. The Harbinger finally showed a vision of Turalyon killing her for embracing the Void. Alleria was returned to Telegra's Rift, which was suddenly under attack by the Harbinger's Void Spawn. Alleria and the Void Elves defended the Rift. The Locust Walker came to lend his assistance. He revealed that the Harbinger was really Xal'atath. The Locust Walker also made a concerning connection. The Locust Walker's homeworld, Koresh, had also sent visions like the Radiant Song before it was destroyed by Dementius the All-Devouring. Alleria pondered if Xal'atath wished to do the same to Azeroth. The Locust Walker told Alleria to master her unique nature, otherwise Azeroth was doomed.